Richard Patterson had always believed he understood the world. At 42, dressed in his finest navy suit and Italian leather shoes, he walked through the city streets with his daughter Emily, tucked safely in his arms. Her blonde curls bounced with each step, and the pink bow in her hair caught the afternoon sunlight. She was his entire world, this precious 4-year-old girl who saw everything with wonder in her bright blue eyes. They had just finished lunch at Sander, one of those elegant restaurants where the silverware gleamed and the waiters remembered your name. Richard had ordered Emily's favorite pasta, and she had chattered away about the shapes of the clouds she could see through the tall windows. These moments, he thought, these simple moments with his daughter, were what truly mattered in life. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, the noise of the city seemed to fade into a gentle hum around them. Richard was thinking about the afternoon ahead, perhaps a walk through the park, maybe stopping for ice cream, when Emily suddenly went very still in his arms, her small hand, which had been playing with his collar, stopped moving. Richard felt her body tense, and he instinctively held her closer, concern flooding through him. Then he saw what had caught her attention. A boy stood on the sidewalk ahead of them. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. His dark hair fell across his forehead in messy strands, and his face bore the unmistakable signs of a hard life lived too young. Dirt smudged his cheeks, and his clothes, a worn gray jacket over a faded shirt, hung loose on his thin frame. In his small hands he clutched a piece of bread, holding it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Richard's first instinct was to guide Emily past quickly. He had seen many such children in the city, and while his heart ached for them, he had learned, as most people do, to keep walking. There were charities, organizations, systems in place for these things. What could one person do? But Emily had other ideas. Her voice, when it came, was not loud or dramatic. It was simply certain, filled with the kind of truth that only children seem to possess. "Daddy," she said softly, her finger pointing toward the boy. "That's my brother." Richard felt the world shift beneath his feet. "What did you say, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's my brother," Emily repeated, her eyes never leaving the boy's face. There was no doubt in her voice, no hesitation. She spoke with the same certainty she used when identifying colors or naming her favorite toys. Richard found himself unable to move. His mind raced through 1,000 explanations, 1,000 rational thoughts, but they all dissolved in the face of his daughter's simple declaration. He looked at the boy again, really looked at him this time, and something in his chest began to crack open. The boy noticed them staring, and his expression changed. Fear flickered across his face, the kind of fear that comes from being noticed when you've learned that being invisible is safer. He took a small step backward, still clutching his bread. Richard felt his knees weaken. Without quite knowing how it happened, he found himself kneeling on the sidewalk, Emily still in his arms. Tears began to stream down his face, surprising him with their sudden intensity. In all his years of business deals and corporate success, in all his years of building an empire and accumulating wealth, he had never felt quite so completely undone. "I'm sorry," he found himself saying, though he wasn't entirely sure what he was apologizing for. Perhaps for all the times he had walked past. Perhaps for the unfairness of the world that put some children in restaurants with white tablecloths and others on street corners with bread in their hands. Perhaps for the walls he had built around his heart without even realizing it. Emily reached out her small hand toward the boy. "It's okay," she said gently, with that remarkable compassion that children possess before the world teaches them otherwise. "You don't have to be scared." The boy's eyes, brown and deep and old beyond his years, met Richard's. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding that transcended words. Richard saw not a stranger, not a problem to be solved, but a child. Someone's son. Someone who laughed and dreamed and hoped, just like his Emily. People walked past them on the busy sidewalk, some glancing over with curiosity, others with irritation at the obstruction. But Richard remained kneeling there, his expensive suit touching the dirty pavement, tears still flowing freely down his face. "What's your name?" he finally managed to ask the boy. Daniel, came the quiet response. Daniel, Richard repeated, and the name felt important somehow, felt real. Have you eaten today? I mean, besides that bread? Daniel shook his head slowly. Richard stood up carefully, still holding Emily close. He reached out his free hand to Daniel, palm open, offering not charity but connection. Would you like to come with us? Would you like something warm to eat? Daniel looked at the hand for a long moment. Richard could see the debate playing out in the boy's eyes, the fear of strangers warring with hunger, with cold, with the basic human need for kindness. Slowly, almost shyly, Daniel placed his small, dirty hand in Richard's large, clean one. They walked together, the three of them, back toward the restaurant. Emily chattered happily, already telling Daniel about the pasta and the clouds and her favorite dessert. Daniel listened, a small smile beginning to form at the corners of his mouth. Richard felt as if he were walking through a dream. His daughter's hand rested on his shoulder, Daniel's hand in his own, and with each step, he felt something fundamental shifting inside him. All the things he had thought were important, the meetings, the deals, the accumulated wealth, seemed to fade into insignificance. As they entered the restaurant, the maitre d' raised an eyebrow at Daniel's appearance, but one look at Richard's face, at the tears still wet on his cheeks, stopped any objection before it formed. They sat at a corner table, Richard helping Daniel into a chair while Emily climbed into her own seat with practiced ease. When the waiter came, Richard ordered generously, soup and sandwiches, warm milk, apple pie. Emily insisted Daniel try the pasta, too. As they waited for the food, Richard watched Daniel slowly relax. The boy's shoulders, which had been hunched up around his ears, gradually lowered. His grip on the bread loosened. When the soup arrived, steaming and fragrant, Daniel picked up the spoon with a carefulness that broke Richard's heart all over again. "Thank you," Daniel whispered. "No," Richard said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you," Emily smiled, reaching across the table to pat Daniel's hand with her small one. "See, Daddy?" she said simply. "I told you he was my brother." And in that moment, in that simple statement from a 4-year-old girl with a pink bow in her hair, Richard understood something profound. She was right. Not in the literal sense, perhaps, but in all the ways that truly mattered. They were all brothers and sisters, all children needing love and care and kindness. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the restaurant windows. Warm and golden, and Richard Patterson, millionaire businessman, sat with 2 children and felt, for the first time in longer than he could remember, truly wealthy.